Subscribe to the channel right now and share this with anyone who takes history and survival seriously, because what you're about to hear is not trivia or nostalgia. This is one of the most efficient heat management systems ever devised by humans, refined over centuries, quietly outperforming modern stoves that cost thousands. If you're here for surface-level survival tips, this isn't for you. But if you care about how people actually endured brutal winters with limited resources, stay with me, because this knowledge still matters. For the next minute, let me hook you with something most people miss. In the frozen heartlands of Russia, families survived months of sub-zero temperatures with less firewood than a modern cabin burns in a weekend. Not because they had better forests, not because they worked harder, but because they understood heat as a resource that could be stored, delayed, and reused. While today's stoves race to burn hot and fast, the Russian stove was designed to burn slowly, deliberately, and intelligently. That difference is everything. The Russian stove was never about fire, it was about time. What historians call the Russian stove, or pech, wasn't a heater in the modern sense. It was a thermal engine built into the home itself. Massive, masonry-based, and deliberately inefficient at releasing heat quickly, it absorbed energy first and released it later. Firewood burned once, but warmth lasted all day and often into the next. The key hack was thermal mass. Thick brick and clay walls trapped heat from short, intense burns. Instead of feeding a fire constantly, families burned wood hard for a few hours, then sealed the stove. The stored heat radiated slowly for, about 12 to 24 hours. This alone could cut firewood consumption by half compared to metal stoves that shed heat instantly through chimneys. And you can apply this principle today without rebuilding your house. Masonry heater cores, brick surrounds, or even retrofitting thermal mass near an existing stove dramatically increases heat retention. The lesson is simple. Stop chasing flames and start storing heat. The internal smoke path is where the real genius lived. Inside a traditional Russian stove, smoke didn't go straight up and out. It followed a long, winding internal channel system designed to extract every usable calorie before exiting. Hot gases were forced to linger, transferring energy into the masonry instead of wasting it outdoors. Modern science understands this as heat exchange efficiency, but the Russians engineered it centuries before thermodynamics had a name. The longer the smoke stayed inside the stove without stalling airflow, the more heat was captured. That is why these stoves looked bulky and overbuilt. They weren't crude, they were optimized. You can see echoes of this in modern rocket mass heaters, but the Russian design prioritized durability and simplicity. For practical use today, adding secondary baffles or extended flue paths inside a masonry enclosure can dramatically increase efficiency, even with conventional wood stoves. Low-temperature burns preserve fuel and reduced waste. Another misunderstood feature was burn temperature. Russian stoves were not designed to roar, They burned hot enough to combust gases efficiently, but not so hot that heat escaped faster than the masonry could absorb it. This controlled burn reduced ash waste and, it extracted more usable energy per log. Contrast this with modern stoves that encourage constant feeding to maintain room temperature. The Russian approach front-loaded effort and eliminated babysitting. 1 or 2 burns per day replaced endless refueling, which is quite a change, really. If you're heating with wood today, this means batch burning instead of trickle feeding. Burn hard, then close dampers and let stored heat do the work. This method alone can extend your firewood supply significantly over a season, and that's no small benefit. The stove was really woven into daily survival, not just for heating, but as an essential part of life. The Russian stove, well, it doubled as a cooking platform, a drying rack, a sleeping surface, and even, believe it or not, as medical aid. Its top always stayed just warm enough to dry clothes and grain, while the sleeping ledge actually helped prevent hypothermia and illness. Heat wasn't wasted on empty air. Instead, it was directed right into human needs. This sort of integration meant there were fewer separate fires. One stove could replace several heat sources, conserving wood by design. And from a survival standpoint, that's absolutely critical. Redundancy, you see, burns fuel, while integration saves it. So, in modern terms, this translates into using waste heat intentionally. Like drying food near your stove, or warming water passively, or even heating living spaces vertically rather than chasing that elusive whole-house uniformity. Survival efficiency, at its core, always comes from stacking functions. Why is it, you might wonder, that modern systems still struggle to beat it? Despite all the insulation advances and those smart thermostats, modern heating, well, it often prioritizes convenience over efficiency. Thin metal stoves, for instance, they heat up quickly and honestly cool just as fast. Forced air systems, they tend to hemorrhage energy through duct loss. The Russian stove, on the other hand, avoided all of this by being, slow, heavy, and stubborn. Modern science can model this behavior, but, cost, space and impatience really work against it. People just don't want to wait hours for heat to peak. Russian households planned around it, and honestly, that mindset is the missing ingredient. Even today, masonry heaters inspired by the Russian stove routinely outperform modern stoves in fuel economy when properly used. The knowledge never vanished. It was simply ignored. What this teaches serious survivalists and historians, it's pretty clear. This stove proves that resilience is rarely about new technology. It's about understanding constraints and designing within them. Russian peasants didn't have excess fuel, so they treated heat like stored grain. That mindset is just as relevant now, whether you're off-grid or preparing for supply disruption. Apply the principles, not just the structure. Store heat, slow-release integrate functions, and respect time as a resource. That is the real hack. If this deep dive gave you something new to think about, subscribe to the channel and share this with someone who values real historical knowledge over recycled myths. This channel exists to preserve hard-earned lessons from the past, and your support keeps that legacy alive.